You're ready.
Okay, welcome to the program tonight entitled "We've Got the Music in Us." This program is going to pay tribute to South Whitley's rich musical heritage. The town has always been the center of an exceptional musical community, including vocal or instrumental, secular or sacred. Music has just seemed to come naturally to the residents here. In the 1920s, County School Superintendent A.R. Fleck was quoted as saying that South Whitley had more musical talent per square inch than any other town in Indiana. Our first gentleman is Olin Harley of the musical Harleys, and this is one I really didn't know anything about till I did this. He was one of South Whitley's earliest contributors to the musical history. The Harley family patriarch, Olin Harley, was known as the Dean of Music in South Whitley, both for his long career of singing and the contributions of his family. Mr. Harley had no formal training, but sang on a professional level in concerts and solo performances whenever he was called upon. He always sang for the joy of singing. Here is an early evidence of a program of the Aryans in which he was the star performer at Central Hall in Columbia City on January 16, 1879. On that night, he sang 9 times in the Aryans Quartet. He also sang a trio and soloed. Another musical event of his time was the presentation of a cantata entitled Esther, the Beautiful Queen, based on the book of Esther in the Bible. Mr. Harley lived in Columbia City from 1852 to 1886, and at the time of these concerts, he was clerking at his father's hardware store before moving to South Whitley. His entire family became part of this legacy also. Here is a photo of Olin's wife, the former Anna Ulrey, with Cora Lancaster, Mamie Glassley, and Alma McConnell, who were members of the Baptist Ladies Quartet for more than 35 years, beginning in 1895. Olin and Anna, along with Mr. and Mrs. Ted Daniels, sang as a quartet for many occasions. Most of them were funerals. At one house funeral during the 1918 flu epidemic, they were denied admission because of quarantine guidelines, so they stood outside the house and sang anyway, which I found kind of appropriate for the time we had lived in now, but they did that back then too. Their 4 children also continued the Harley tradition of deep musical roots. His daughter Florence, the baby of the family, and sons George Arthur, Herbert, and Robert all performed in South Whitley in their own musical ways. Towards the end of his life, Olin Harley became one of the oldest residents in the town. When he celebrated his 100th birthday on August 12, 1950, he received over 2,000 birthday cards. He died in July 1951, just shy of his 101st birthday. Unfortunately, his wife Anna preceded him in death in 1944. Okay, our next South Whitley resident was Miss Jenny Bain Wilson. She was born Mary Jane Wilson and was born on November 13, 1856 on a farm in Cleveland Township, 1 mile north of South Whitley on what is now State Road 5. She was the daughter of Robert and Mary Frances Wilson. Tragedy struck her at an early age, though, with the death of her father, and then at the age of 4, she contracted polio, and she was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Unable to attend school, her education was conducted at home. It was here that she found her love of music and poetry. In 1881, she was baptized into a life of Christ by being carried on a chair to confess to her dear Savior. Even though she was wheelchair bound, she enjoyed attending Bible conferences in nearby Winona Lake. In spite of her malady, she wrote poems that appeared in the local newspaper, and with the influence of Reverend Jacob D. Coverstone, she began writing hymns that she would send to Publication House in Dayton, Ohio. Her first hymn was entitled All the Way. Without prior knowledge it was being published, Jenny was surprised when she saw it in the new songbooks that were bought for her neighborhood Sunday school. Miss Wilson became a prolific writer of gospel hymns and is said to have composed over 2,200 hymns and songs. She was given the nickname the Fanny Crosby of the West. There was no trace of her disability in her literary work, though, except for the poem entitled A Memory Picture. It refers to the scenery near her home and refers to the memories of the days when she could walk. Here is one of the songs, Hold to God's Unchanging Hands, that she wrote the lyrics for. The song was likely penned in 1904 when she sent it to Frank Island, who composed the music for it the following year in his backyard of his Texas home. It was first published in 1906 in the New Hosannas Hymnal that was produced by the Quartet Family Music Company of Fort Worth, Texas, and edited by John E. Thomas. Miss Wilson died on September 3rd, 1913 at the home of her sister, Miss Eliza Ann Ullery in South Whitley, and she was buried at South Whitley Cemetery. Hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, oh, that was wonderful.
The original Agony Band was our next musical act. They were the original Agony Band, and it was the first South Whitley High School band. It was comprised of many local musicians, including Hugo Fox on alto clarinet, Eugene Glassley on trombone, Frank Dimmick on bass drum, Ray Clapp on valve trombone, and both Boyd Sickerloose and Lloyd Holben on baritone. The musical group became the predecessor for later town bands. The 1915 South Whitley High School yearbook noted the Agony Band was organized in 1912 by School Superintendent W.W. Wells, with Lloyd Holben as the leader. Under the management of Eugene Glassley and Robert Harley, it was proven to be one of the most popular groups to be a member of in high school. One of the band's many highlights was when they accompanied the track team to the county meet and performed at the concert. In 1913, the band traveled by train at the Vandalia Depot and headed for the Old Settlers' Day in Columbia City. Their claim was they were the best band in the county. The band took many excursions to towns like Bippas, Roanoke, and Huntington, where they would play in the streets, and one of the boosters would speak and sing the praises of the town of South Whitley. W.W. Wells also played the flute and piccolo along with the students. He was quoted as saying it was a little band who was proud of their white uniforms. The bandstand and concert night in South Whitley. Band concert night in South Whitley happened every Wednesday night all summer long in the early 1900s. These concerts were a major attraction for the townspeople from the time of World War I and later. The town band sat in an octagonal canopy bandstand that was supported by a big pedestal and a stairway leading up to it. The bandstand was located on the corner of the Glassley Dry Goods store on State Street. This stand was used until its removal around the time they started to pave State Street. After it was paved, a temporary flat bandstand was used for concerts at that location. The bandstand was later moved to a block east where the post office is now located. Here is a depiction of the original octagonal bandstand drawn by Roy Porter, with the band playing and the townspeople enjoying band concert night. The concerts were a weekly celebration of South Whitley and the farming area. People old and new converged on the town to listen to music, do a bit of shopping, and enjoy a soda at the drugstore. A big attraction at these concerts were the sugar drawings. This was very popular before and during the Depression years when both money and sugar were scarce. South Whitley's merchants would give away tickets all week long, and then the night of the concert, stubs were placed in a big hopper. The crowd would wait to hear the lucky numbers called, and usually around 10 to 20 tickets were drawn for free sacks of sugar. Jean's Men's Chorus. In September 1927, just as the close of a successful concert season by the South Whitley Band under the direction of Gene Glassley, a young merchant in town, a call-out was made at an open-air concert on the streets of South Whitley. Gene's call was for men who could sing. 16 men promptly responded to this call. Regular weekly rehearsals were planned and carried out every Tuesday evening at the local high school building. A very short time later, the chorus grew to a membership of 50 men. There were men from all across the social spectrum, including farmers and ministers, mail carriers, mechanics, merchants, barbers, high school students and their teachers, bank cashiers, and artists. The director, Mr. Gene Glassley, was a grocer. The purpose of the choir was to sing a better spirit into the community and county. Once you became a member of the group, you were required to pay a fee of 80 cents for music and to supply yourselves with music. Several concerts were given in local churches and other towns like Larwell and Huntington. But on January 8, 1928, the group had the honor of traveling to Fort Wayne to broadcast an hour-long presentation on WOWO, a local radio station that went area-wide. They also gave several summer concerts, including the Winona Lake Chautauqua, which is an assembly tent that offered lectures, concerts, and presentations in the early 20th century. Here's a sample of what our next musician created. As you probably knew, that was Hugo Fox of Fox Products. Hugo Eugene Fox was born on February 3rd, 1897 to William and Elizabeth Miller Fox. With his birth came one of the lasting legacies in South Whitley's rich musical history that still exists today. Hugo attended high school in South Whitley and graduated with a class of 1914. It was in high school where Hugo's love of music began to shine. He played saxophone in the high school band and the alto clarinet in the Agony Band. Upon graduation, he was given a bassoon by his parents. In 1915, Hugo sought out help from Adolph Weiss, second bassoon player in the Chicago Symphony. Hugo would travel from South Whitley to Chicago every 2 weeks just to have a 1-hour lesson with Weiss. He joined the Navy during World War I, and after his discharge, he attended the Civic Music League in Akron, Ohio for a year. In 1922, Walter Getter, one of Hugo's former bassoon instructors, was offered the first chair in the Philadelphia Orchestra, making way for Hugo to be offered Walter's chair in the Chicago Symphony. Fox and his family, including son Alan, returned to South Whitley in 1949 after many years of living in Chicago. Upon the family's return, Hugo founded local company Fox Products in a former chicken coop, seen here. He started to build bassoons according to his conception. Hugo continued his work building his bassoons and running his business until ill health forced him to retire in 1962. At the time of Hugo's retirement, his son Alan left his career as a chemical engineer to come home and take over for his father as a general manager of Fox Products. 4 years after joining his father's company, Alan, not a musician, began to research bore dimensions and acoustics to manufacture a contrabassoon. Hugo died in December 1969, and the first contrabassoon was shipped out in 1972. In 1974, Fox Products suffered a devastating loss as a woodworking building was destroyed by fire of unknown origins. In 1976, a groundbreaking was held for a new two-phase, 7,500 square foot building that became the main manufacturing facility. Alan retired and sold the business in 2012, and he died in 2023. Under the guidance of Tony Starkey, Fox Products is still a leading manufacturer of bassoons, contrabassoons, English horns, and oboes across the world. This is the 1919 Homecoming in Chautauqua. The definition of a Chautauqua is any various traveling shows and assemblies that flourished in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These gatherings were an event where theater and the arts would come together to educate and entertain citizens across America, and South Whitley was no exception to acquiring one of these shows. For 5 days in the summer of 1919, thousands of people visited the town in the first of what later would become an annual event and was known as the Chautauqua and Homecoming Celebration. Saturday, August 2nd was an especially banner day for attendance, with cars being parked 2 to 3 deep on one of the side streets in every direction. For the opening number to the grand closing concert, the big tent was packed at every single session. One of the popular acts to perform at the Chautauqua was the Hearts Girls Band of Hicksville, Ohio. They won a place in the hearts of people by their pleasing delivery of vocal and instrumental selections. The local Bipus band was also on hand to perform their old-time form and to give concerts during the afternoon and evenings. Vieira's Hawaiian Instrumentals was a fun act on Sunday, August 3rd. They were instrumentals and singers who portrayed the music and customs of Hawaii. And when I was doing the research and found this, at the same time, we also found research that one of the buildings in town also housed the Hawaiian band at the same time. So whether Hawaiian bands must have been popular then. So the final musical act of the 5-day festival was the Victor's Colombian Band with a rich collection of ensemble numbers, solos, and rich instrumental groupings. The A to Z Cornet Band. The A to Z Cornet Band was another group of young men who performed concerts in South Whitley in the early part of the 1900s. They met regularly during the winter months to practice and prepare for the following summer's performances. The A to Z Band was sponsored by the A to Z Publishing Company. The company was located at the corner of State and Broad Street in South Whitley that was eventually Gripco. The proprietor of the company was Robert E. Hicks, and even though they had sponsorship, the boys also had to save their own money to help with expenses. They gave it to W.F. Norris, the treasurer of the band, to use for room rental, new music, coal to heat the room, and to pay a stipend to director J.H. Miller. The sponsorship paid for their attractive black and green uniforms and the instruments. Some of the boys had familiar names in the community, and we still hear stories about them today, such as Esta Fox, C.C. Keel, Firmer Glassley, Roy Steller, Firmer Nichols, and Wilson L. Dimmick, among several others. This is the Mandolin Club. There's little known about the Mandolin Club of 1927, but it was a small group of young ladies who were taught the finer points of the mandolin under the direction of Mrs. Robert E. Hicks. Not much else is known about the group, other than that they had their lessons in the early part of their young life. They were taught to develop an appreciation for music and the more cultural points in life. Some of the girls grew up to be upstanding adults in the community, including Bessie Kramer Lynn, Mary Bollinger Blah, Clara Marie Bechtel Cordell, Evelyn Bollinger Gilmer, and Dorothy Myers Murphy, to name a few. And I'm going to play some music to go with our next act. This is the music that Helen Day Schuster would have played in her era. A big band love story from 1938 to 2021. Helen Irene Day was born on January 3rd, 1923 to a poor rural family in Whitley County, Indiana. Her beloved brother Richard arrived 3 years later. In their early years, when Helen was 6 and Richard was 3, they went to live with relatives on their grandparents' farm. They lived there for 6 years while their father worked on the railroad and their mother worked for a nanny for a family many miles away. Helen's musical journey began at the age of 7 with piano lessons from her young aunt. Unfortunately, the piano was not for her. She began playing the school saxophone and also the clarinet. Her life as a true musician began at South Whitley High School when she was in the 10th grade. She received her first saxophone that was hers to keep. In 1938, her Aunt Ellen, who worked for the Kahn Instrument Factory, acquired it for her, and a year later she got Helen a clarinet. For the next 3 years, she had one goal: join the big band's era. She graduated from South Whitley High School with a class of 1941, and in April of 1942, she received the opportunity to audition for the Edith Roger Dahl Platinum Blondes Band and officially joined the band when they played in Chicago. She went on to perform with many other bands and in national tours, including the 1946 Bob Hope's USO tour. In November of 1951, Helen joined a group called the Quadettes, and this became the last band she performed with during the big band era. In March 1952, Helen met Don Schuster and fell in love. They were married in September of that year. She bid the big band farewell and settled into married life. During the early part of 1953, Helen still practiced her instrument as a stay-at-home wife while Don worked as the town funeral director in their tiny rural community. They soon started a family and moved to Galva, Illinois. They lived there for the next 40 years with their 2 daughters. In 1969, Helen got another big break when she joined the Bishop Hill High Society Band, also known as the Clown Band. She remained a member of that group until 1980, and she slowly began to work her way back up to playing in many new bands. In 1989, Helen and Don became snowbirds in Tampa, Florida. 1990 ushered in a second heyday for Helen, and nearly 40 years after leaving the road, she was back. For the next 30 years, she played with several bands and ensembles in Florida and Illinois. Unfortunately, Don died on December 23, 2016, but Helen continued to play. Her final concert was unexpectedly on February 17, 2020, due to the lockdown from the COVID pandemic. She was 97 years of age at her last concert. Helen passed away on August 12, 2021. She passed away on August 12, 2021. And for more of this story, her daughters actually wrote a book, and we have the books down in the genealogy department. If you want to read the entire story, you can come down and check those out. Okay. John Walter Flieger, and I'm going to play some music what he was known for. Some of you may know that this one is what? Flieger? So this is what he was known for. Okay. John Walter Flieger, the son of Waldo and Flora Benjamin Flieger, I know I don't say that right, was born on October 19, 1942. He grew up on Line Street in South Whitley and attended South Whitley High School, where he fostered his love of music by singing baritone in the chorus. John also played cornet in the band as well. Music was not the only thing he excelled at in school. His senior year, he was one of 2 winners of the Harley Award for exemplifying qualities of leadership, citizenship, character, scholarship, and athletic ability. During John's 1960 high school graduation, he sang a solo on "Climb Every Mountain" with the senior high school vocal group. After graduation, John attended both Morehead State and Indiana State Universities, where he acquired a degree in music education and mathematics. He eventually moved to Wisconsin, where he taught math in the public school system and continued to work his music career by appearing in several opera productions, concerts, and contests. In June 1971, he was one of the winners of the American Opera auditions, and as a prize, he got to make his European debut. John debuted in Paris in the role of Marcello in Puccini's La Boheme. He eventually auditioned in West Germany and received a contract with the Staatstheater in Saarbrücken, Germany, where he sang 14 different operas in 2 seasons. It was there in Saarbrücken that he met and married his wife, Rosemary. John soon became a member of the ensemble and first baritone at the Bielefeld Municipal Opera. It was in the role of Rodrigo in Verdi's Don Carlos that brought him international acclaim. In his long career living in Germany, he took on many different roles and appeared in numerous operas. John died August 31st, 2018 in New Gloucester, Lower Saxony, Germany, and was buried over there. Our next musical act was Mary H. Yarnell. She was born on March 5th, 1926 in Clearwater, Florida to Richard and Mary May Hall. Before Mary was 5 years old, she had her first semi-professional appearance thanks to her aunt who was involved in the theater industry. By the age of 9, Mary was well on her way to a life of stage and screen, even holding an Actors Equity card, which was a form of identification in the Actors Equity Association National Union. She made appearances in many plays in New York, Chicago, and Cincinnati. Mary starred with Helen Hayes and Victoria Regina and was in a party scene in Gone with the Wind. As a teenager, Mary performed with the Jerry Colonus Group on Bob Hope's USO tours. She married Richard Yarnell on October 5th, 1946, and decided to forego a career in movies. Richard and Mary eventually moved to South Whitley and raised their 4 children here. Her passion for theater didn't stop, though, and she continued to act and direct at several local venues. Mary even went to work at Whitco High School on many theater productions. In 1980, Mary starred on Golden Pond playing the role of Ethel Thayer, and in 1981 she portrayed Aunt Eller in the musical Oklahoma, both at Fort Wayne Civic Theater. The talent in the Yarnell family, though, didn't stop with Mary. Theater became a 3-generation family business with sons Jim and David and daughter Patty, and Jim's daughters Elizabeth and Alexis. Her sons acted with Mary on many occasions, and then she also took direction from them when it was their turn to direct. Mary was quoted as saying, "Her family all have theatrical backgrounds." Mary died on May 13, 2015 at the age of 89. And according to her daughter Patty Waybright, neither brother is involved with the community theater anymore. Jim is currently living in Indianapolis and is retired and loves to travel a great deal. And David is presently an adjunct professor at the University of Arizona. Whitco Marching Pride. The Whitco Marching Pride was part of the pun, a source of pride to the community since the schools consolidated in 1972. Cleon Marsh was the first band director at the newly formed Whitco Community School Corporation from 1972 to 1977. He worked to blend musicians from the 4 local schools into one marching band. Brad Walker took over as director from 1978 to 1985 and was a big part in forming what the band has become today. He was the first director to add band camp in the summertime, a marching contest in which the band traveled to many different schools and contests for prizes and prestige, and the first drum major, Brian Fox, who was the on-field leader for his other bandmates. The band still practices very hard before and after school to perfect their theme programs for contests and football games alike. Under Mr. Walker and the next 9 band directors, Whitco's youth has played their instruments and in previous time twirled flags and rifles and won many state awards and accolades. Some of these students have been recognized and had the honor of representing our small town in other local and national bands. One example of these recognitions I am proud to say has a personal connection to me. My brother Tony was selected as one of the local contestants to play 3rd chair trombone in a 76-member National Goodwill Band sponsored by the American Musical Ambassadors in 1986. After leaving Indiana to meet up with other band members in New York City, the band left for Europe, and Tony spent the entire summer before his senior year playing in various concerts in venues like Venice, Milan, Salzburg, Paris, and London. His favorite spot, and he still talks about it, his favorite spot was always Holland, though, where he got to stay with an older couple for a week, because they had host families there. And Tony's host family were an older couple who were survivors of the Auschwitz concentration camp. And they didn't like to talk about it, and they didn't want to talk about it, but because Tony was a young man, they wanted him to know what the horrors of the Nazi Germany was, so they told Tony the story and how they were tattooed with numbers on their arms while he was, and he said that left a lasting impact on him. In 1998, 3 more Whitco band members had the distinction of being chosen for a regional tri-state band consisting of the best musicians in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and after an audition at IPFW in Fort Wayne. Even though the number of band members has shrunk, Whitco band members continue to march with pride. Whitco School Choir and Gospel Choir. The band was not the only source for students to show their musical talent at Whitco High School. The choirs of Whitco have always brought great musical talent to our area. In 1972, the concert choir had a few select members chosen to form the first Whitco Swing Choir, and in the late 1970s, the choir expanded to include the gospel choir. These choirs laid a foundation for the choral program that have the future success in many state contests. The Whitco Gospel Choir would tour and give performances at many area churches and in private concerts for local businesses, organizations, and special events. Whitco choirs have had many accomplishments from the Indiana State School Music Association. The 2010 choir earned a gold rating at the state competition by singing the a cappella piece entitled Ride the Chariot. Just a few years later, in 2012, the school's choir again found great achievement with 7 soloists reaching the state competitions. 2 ensembles for the group, 1 male and 1 female, also earned state recognition that year. There is only 1 choir now at Whitco that is still going strong under the direction of Mrs. Sarah Sko. Janie Fricke. I couldn't have a musical program without including South Whitley's most recognizable former resident, Janie Fricke. Some of you may know her or have met her, so you are probably way more knowledgeable on her life in South Whitley than I am, I'm sure. But Jane Marie Fricke was born on December 19, 1947 in rural South Whitley. She is the youngest daughter of the late Waldemar and Phyllis E. Kyler Fricke. Janie was surrounded at home by music at a very young age, with her father teaching her guitar and her mother playing piano. Phyllis would bring home sheet music and Janie would play and sing. She performed music outside the home at many school functions and public functions. Janie attended South Whitley High School, graduating in 1966. After high school, she attended Indiana University and graduated with a degree in elementary education. While in college, Janie continued to sing with a vocal group called the Singing Hoosiers. Her participation in the group led to opportunities as a commercial jingle singer. Some of the jingles she sang were for companies like Red Lobster, Coca-Cola, Pizza Hut, and McDonald's, among many others. Janie moved to Nashville in 1975. While working as a secretary there, she would audition and join a group called the Leah Jane Singers, the quartet that sang background vocals for Nashville's recording sessions. Janie sang a soprano part in the group. During the mid-1970s, Janie would appear on more than 5,000 records as part of the group. And in 1977, she accepted and signed a contract with Columbia Records. She began working with producer Billy Sherrill and recorded her debut single, What You're Doing Tonight. The song went to number 2 on the Billboard charts and led to her first nomination from the Grammy Awards. The following year, she released her debut studio album, Singer of Songs. In 1980, Janie's focus turned to singing and releasing ballads. She worked with well-known producer Jim Edward Norman on her next single, Down to My Last Broken Heart. This single climbed to the #2 spot on the Billboard and RPM charts. Janie's next collaboration was with producer Bob Montgomery, with whom she transitioned to singing a more up-tempo pop country sound. This collaboration led to her hit song, He's a Heartache Looking for a Place to Happen, which reached the #1 on the Billboard Country LP charts. After that, Janie's career took off and her popularity soared. This led to her winning the Female Vocalist of the Year from the Country Music Association in both 1982 and 83. By the late 1980s, Janie was so frustrated with people like Phil Collins and Charlie Pride mispronouncing her last name that she had the spelling changed and added an I after the K but before the E, so she would stop being called Janie Frick. Her final album with Columbia Records was in 1989. Columbia Records promptly dropped her in 1990. Following her departure, she took up residency at theaters in Branson, Missouri. In the new millennium, Janie launched her own record label under JMF. Under this label, she produced an album called Bouncin' Back. This was the first time in her career that she promoted and sold the album exclusively on the internet. In 2004, she recorded a new album project called the Bluegrass Sessions. This disc was a re-release collection of her former hits in bluegrass format. The album was again released in 2012 by the New Music Deals and retitled The Countryside of Bluegrass. The album received mixed reviews from writers and journalists, and Janie went on to return to her own music label then. Janie recorded her first Christmas album, A Country Girl's Christmas. She produced the project along with her husband, Jeff Steele. Today, Janie resides in Wilmer, Texas, but she still tours the country performing in shows. On December 14th of this year, Janie will be back in the area performing at Lakeview Middle School in Warsaw with Susie McIntyre, Keeney, and Linda Davis. And this is one of the songs you might hear her sing.
They stood waiting to hear his word. One by one, they drew nearer. The light grew brighter as they heard. All the mountains, through the desert, the rocky road was way too long, but soon the shepherd
they say in The Sound of Music, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, and thank you for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed this look back at our musical history. Okay.
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions about
Comments?
anything.
Is that off?
No.
No.